One Championships event, 1X, earlier this year was proof that the UFC isn't the only promotion that houses world-class talent. The spotlight shone brightly on Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, who proved two things. One, that he's still one of the best combat athletes in the world, and two, the UFC's decision to trade him for Ben Askren aged extremely poorly. Hardcore MMA fans know that there's a wealth of elite talent existing across the globe. Without a shadow of a doubt, the UFC still boasts the biggest treasure chest of pound-for-pound talent, but they definitely don't have a monopoly in that department. There are some fighters that, whether at present or in the past, have managed to stay under the UFC's radar. These men and women have exemplary skills and intangible traits, but for whatever reason, never signed on the dotted line to fight for Dana White's empire. In today's video, that's what we're delving into. Now, who are these absolute killers that the UFC has missed out on? Number 5. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. Let's start with the obvious one. You can't have a conversation about the greatest of all time in mixed martial arts without mentioning one Demetrius Johnson. In hindsight, it was baffling to fathom why the UFC allowed him to walk and compete for a rival promotion. Not only that, they basically served up Mighty Mouse on a silver platter for someone who ended up retiring after just 3 fights and getting KO'd by Jake freaking Paul. Mighty Mouse didn't necessarily have a flawless UFC run. He lost to Dominic Cruz and had a close call against Ian McCall early in his career. But once he got hold of the inaugural UFC Flyweight Championship in 2012, Johnson would put together a historic reign that hasn't been equaled to this day. He successfully defended his crown a record 11 consecutive times against the likes of Joseph Benavidez, John Dodson, and Henry Cejudo. Since then, his only loss was a controversial split decision against Cejudo in a rematch. Once he arrived in Asia, Johnson aced 3 straight victories to emerge victorious at the One Flyweight World Grand Prix, although he ultimately fell short in his quest to capture the promotion's flyweight title. It can be argued that the UFC didn't necessarily miss out on Mighty Mouse. After all, he spent his prime years fighting in the Octagon. However, Johnson's recent performance against Rodtang is an indication that he's still got more left in the tank. Given that he's still relatively young at 35, the UFC definitely whiffed on the opportunity to have a wiser version of Johnson competing under its banner. Number 4. Ong La N Song. It's time to talk about one of the most watched fighters inside the Octagon. The name? Ong La N Song. His reign as a 2-division champ in one is easily one of the best runs any fighter has had in the promotion's history. In his prime, Ong La didn't have an air of invincibility as one would expect from a champion who held down 2 different weight classes for 3 years. The Burmese Python found himself in competitive back-and-forth fights a couple of times, but would consistently come up with ways to outlast his opponent. His eagerness to welcome a messy, swang-and-bang type of fight is what made Ong La quite devastating. On top of that, the Myanmar native has always shown tremendous heart and a never-say-die attitude, as is evident in his wars with Alangalani and former UFC star Brandon Vera. Unfortunately, Father Time appears to have caught up with the Burmese Python, as he's now lost 3 of his last 4 fights and a pair of titles along the way. That being the case, we'll never know how the legendary fighter would have fared against the top guys in the UFC. Number 3. Kayla Harrison. Now, let's talk about the women, shall we? Not her, but her, Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison has taken the MMA world by storm ever since she started fighting professionally in 2019. How good is she? Simply put, she's Ronda Rousey 2.0. Like the inaugural women's bantamweight champ, judo was Harrison's introduction to combat sports. Unlike Rousey though, Harrison was far more accomplished as an Olympian. The Massachusetts native successfully captured Olympic gold during her campaigns in 2012 and 2016 respectively. Once she transitioned into cage fighting, Harrison proved to be an absolute juggernaut. Harrison competes under the PFL banner where she has never been defeated and has only gone the distance twice. Through 12 fights, no one has even come close to giving her a tough time in the cage. With that in mind, Harrison could be compared to a female version of Khamzat Chimaev, who until recently wiped the floor with every opponent he's faced despite being fairly inexperienced. There were rumblings about Harrison making her way into the Octagon when her contract with the PFL expired earlier this year. However, she ultimately signed a multi-fight extension with her promotion, meaning the UFC would have to wait a few more years before they can get another shot at signing Harrison. Number 2. Adriano Moraes. As we've already established at the beginning of the video, Mighty Mouse remained one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world today. That said, we'd be remiss if we left out the only man to hand him a stoppage loss. One flyweight champion, Adriano Moraes. The 32-year-old is already in the midst of his 3rd reign as the One Flyweight champion and has kickstarted his 2022 campaign with a successful title defense against against Yuya Wakamatsu. While the 3 title reigns are impressive indeed, they also show that he is beatable on any given night. However, they also indicate that McKee is an intelligent fighter who learns from his mistakes. Moraes crossing paths with Johnson in a rematch feels like an inevitability at this point. If Moraes can prove that his initial victory wasn't a fluke, he would have to go down as one of the biggest missed signings in UFC history. Number 1. McKee. In many cases, whoever holds the UFC title is without a doubt the best fighter in their division. However, there are a few exceptions to the rule, and one of them is Bellator featherweight champion McKee. The featherweight phenom is undefeated in 18 fights, and there is no reason to believe that we've already seen his best work. McKee, in his most recent outing, captured the Bellator 145-pound title with a stunning first-round submission of longtime division monarch Patricio Pitbull. On top of that, McKee is a bona fide highlight reel machine. The Californian has consistently churned out exhilarating finishes since his debut in 2015, earning his rightful place as the pound-for-pound king and poster boy of Bellator MMA. The mercenary proved he was special from the get-go, steamrolling anyone who stood in his way. However, it wasn't until he outperformed former 2-time Bellator featherweight world champion Pat Curran that fans found out he was the real deal. With McKee standing out in Bellator, fans are left wondering how he would fare against the UFC's top featherweights. Could he be the one to finally end Alexander Volkanovski's seemingly unstoppable run? Only time will tell. If you like this video and want to see more, subscribe to SportsKeeda MMA on YouTube and follow our social media accounts for all MMA related content.